I would like to call your attention to. I have completed, if you remember, the book of Hosea. So I now commence this month of January to the study of the Song of Solomon. If you turn with me to the first chapter of the Song of Solomon, this morning we want just to look at the first verse. The Song of Solomon, chapter 1 and verse 1. Song of Solomon, chapter 1 and verse 1. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. That's how this book commenced. That's how this book begins. The ancient Jews considered this book to be so a holy book that they describe it as the Holy of Holies. From this title, you know the high regard the people of God always had for this book, the Song of Solomon. And isn't it sad, brothers and sisters, that it was so highly prized by those who walked with God in the past? But this is a book that is closed to those who are God's children today. I can be sure to say that most of us have never read through this Song of Solomon. And even if you had, it is very likely that you do not know what you're reading about. And that's the reason why I felt that this is important, that I consider with you the next few Sundays a summary of this Song of Solomon and help you understand this book that has always been loved by God's people in history. And I trust that after our studies together, you will find a deep love for this song as well. It was composed by Solomon in the year 965 BC, 965 BC. It is considered to be a song of love. That's the reason why the ancient Jews will not allow anybody who is below the age of 30 years old to read this Song of Solomon. And this is really something funny. Because in the ancient time, brothers and sisters, most people would be married by the age of 16 to 17. And so can you imagine you are married, and by the time you are 30 years old, you already had children, or maybe a grandchild even. And then you can only start to read from the age of 30. So you can see that this human restriction and human limitation is of no use, it's nonsensical. The Bible never says that you must be 30 years and above before you can read this book. It is called the Song of Solomon, but in some Bibles, as well as in some Bible commentary, you realize that it is called also the Canticles. Canticles. Canticles, the English word, means a series of songs with one theme in mind. The Song of Solomon is made out of a series of shorter songs and is put together as one song, the Song of Solomon. We know that there's at least 3 sections to it. If you look there, that you find in this song a chorus. If you turn to chapter 2 and verse 7, you find the first mention, the chorus. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelle, or by the doors of the field. Do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. The second is mentioned in chapter 3 and verse 5. The words are the same. And the third is in chapter 8 and verse 4. You find that it is with some modification, but basically it is a chorus with the same thoughts and the same idea. And so you can be sure, brothers and sisters, there are at least 3 shorter songs put together in this one Song of Solomon. And I'll call your attention to the first verse. He says, the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs. I'm sure by just reading the Song of Songs, I'm sure that your mind will link you to something that is very familiar in the Bible. Because elsewhere you've read in the Holy Bible, the Holy of Holies, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. So you see, this is Hebrew poetry, the Hebrew way of superlative, the Hebrew way of emphasis. Solomon wanted to emphasize that this is the Song of Songs, because as far as he's concerned, this is the very best songs that he has ever composed. If you turn with me now to 1 Kings chapter 4, you realize that 1 Kings chapter 4 summarized for us the total number of proverbs and songs that King Solomon composed. 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 32. Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Out of these 1,005 songs, in the eyes of Solomon the composer, under the inspiration of God's Holy Spirit, this is the Song of Songs. This is the best of them all. And yet, brothers and sisters, isn't it striking and isn't it sad that this is supposed to be the best of all songs, and yet it is not the best of all songs to you? You hardly read it. And if you do, as I have said earlier, you find it so hard to understand. You do not put in the effort, you see. And you do not put in the effort to read and to search the scriptures. And that's where we are so much spiritually in the worst state than those who take the time and commit the devotion to find out the meaning of this Song of Solomon. And that's what I want to do with you the next few Sundays. The next words that is here found in this chapter 1 and verse 1 of Solomon is the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. You will realize that the word is, which is missing in the Hebrew. It is put in by the English translator. If not, it will be nonsensical in the English language. Let me, for example, read for you. In the original Hebrew, it says, the Song of Songs, Solomon's. It can mean Solomon composed it. It can mean it is about Solomon. Which is which then, brothers and sisters? From what we read here, brothers and sisters, it is about Solomon. Because Solomon is mentioned throughout this Song of Solomon, and he is mentioned, for example, in chapter 1 and verse 1. In chapter 1 and verse 5, you find him mentioned again, like the curtains of Solomon. Chapter 3 and verse 7, for example, you find that he is mentioned there, behold, it is Solomon's couch. And there are others that I will not bother you with, and I've listed there in the outline, which I have inserted in the Korean this morning. In other words, brothers and sisters, this is a song, the best song composed by Solomon, about Solomon's love of the Shulamite woman. Yes, it is a love song. It describes his human love for a lady and the lady's love for Solomon. It is about Solomon, King Solomon, but brothers and sisters, it doesn't stop there. The reason why the people of God in history has always prized this Song of Solomon is because as you read this song in the right understanding, you realize that your heart is lifted up, and you find that you are wondering and pondering about God's love for His people. Because when we see love as Christians, we cannot help but be reminded of, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son to this world of sin and rebellion. It is about Solomon and his love of this lady. Now, what is the context of these songs? How should we understand the historical setting of these songs, in other words? Now you have to turn back to chapter 8 and verse 11 to get the context there being introduced to us. It tells us there, Solomon had a vineyard, chapter 8 and verse 11, at Baal Hamon. He leased the vineyard to keepers. Everyone was to bring for its fruit 1,000 silver coins. That tells us something, brothers and sisters, that Solomon actually, he owned many plots of land in Israel as a king. And this was this plot of land here that he leased it out to this Shulamite woman, her mother, at least 2 brothers and a little sister. As you read, you'll find them being mentioned by the Shulamite woman. And one day, King Solomon took a rest from his duty as king, and he visited this vineyard. There at this vineyard, he saw this lovely lady who is referred to as the Shulamite. Shulamite means a person, somebody from the town of Shulam. So that's the reason why he is called Shulamite or Shalomite, or the MIT is describing a person. So she's from the town of Shulam. And then she was there, she saw Solomon, but she could not recognize Solomon as the king. She thought that he was an ordinary shepherd who had come to find rest and water in this vineyard that she had leased from the king. And after a conversation taking place, brothers and sisters, Solomon fell in love with her, and she fell in love with Solomon. And so that is basically the outline of this book. You must bear in mind that this is the setting. If not, when you read the Song of Solomon, you'll miss something confusing to you. So with this setting in mind, I want now the outline to be called to you from chapter 1 and verse 2 to chapter 3 and verse 5. You find there the description of courtship. Courtship. What is courtship? Courtship is love expressed. Love expressed. In courtship, you show your interest. In courtship, you show your love for the person and you express it to the person. They are like you. Can we have a relationship? Do you think there is a possibility of us having a long-term commitment relationship beginning with this courtship? And then the next point is from chapter 3 and verse 6 all the way to chapter 5 and verse 1. You find there the wedding. You read that in mind, that section. And what is the wedding? The wedding is love mature. Love mature. Love mature. That's what wedding is. You have come to an adult decision. You have come to a after careful reflection with your family, you have come to make a commitment. Only a person who is mature can make such a commitment. If not, the marriage will be a disaster. The last section is from chapter 5 verse 2 to chapter 8 and verse 14. It speaks of Solomon's marital life with this Shulamite woman. And what is the marital life? The life of a marriage couple? It is love tested. Love tested. And isn't it true, brothers and sisters? We find so many people divorced. They fail the test. They claim once upon a time they love one another. And a man will boast that I'm willing to swim the widest ocean and climb the highest mountain. And I will even be willing to take the ladder and pluck the stars. And for you, if you would just ask me. And yet, today they are divorced. Bitter. Because they failed when they live their marital life together. Then they realize that their love was not true love, but lust. So bearing in mind this, brothers and sisters, I'm quite sure that when you go home the next few days, if I have interested you, you take the book of Solomon, you read it in the context, in the structure, in the outline that I provided you, you'll find strangely, brothers and sisters, that your heart is drawing deeper in the love of God, deeper in the love of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, brothers and sisters, it will be said, if you read this love poem or song as merely a human love poem, because the Bible is a book of God. This is where many modern Christians are wrong. This is where the New King James Bible is absolutely wrong. Because the New King James Bible like to put the subheadings, which is not in the original Hebrew. They are what we will call in Hokkien, kê kiam. They put all the subheadings, and all the subheadings are provided because of the bias of the translator. The translators, they have certain bias, and most of them are not Calvinists. And so they do not see here Christ. They do not see here anything except a purely human love story. That is definitely not what it is. I want you to draw attention to what the Lord Jesus tells us about the Old Testament to the book of Luke. Luke chapter 24. Luke 24. And verse 44. Then Jesus said to them, "These are the words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms concerning me." And he opened their understanding, that they might comprehend the scriptures. And so here, brothers and sisters, we are told by Jesus himself that when you read the Old Testament, you must look out for him. Solomon is a type of Christ in this song. Solomon was not a perfect man like Jesus. Solomon was like his father, David, an imperfect man. But God, in his wisdom, selected Solomon to be a type of Christ in this. And when you read the Song of Solomon, you read of his love for this Shulamite woman, you must remember his love for his people. It is the song of Christ, which is our last point in the outline that I provided for you. The picture of marriage, brothers and sisters, is often used to describe the relationship of God with his people. That's what it has always been. For example, if we turn to the book of Isaiah, which is the next book after Solomon is Isaiah, to 54 and verse 5. You'll find there in 54 and verse 5 in Isaiah, "For your Maker is your husband. The Lord of hosts is his name. And your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. He is called the God of the whole earth." You realize that, brothers and sisters? Your Maker is your husband. Your Maker is like the person of Solomon in this love song. You have to read it that way. And if you do not, brothers and sisters, you miss the point. You will end up like the liberals and the unbelievers who say that they are experts of the Bible when they don't even understand the love of God. Now turn to the words of the Apostle Paul in Ephesians. You have to turn to the physical Bible, because what I quoted for you in the outline is just merely a few words. There are more verses than that. In chapter 5, verse 23. Wives, submit to your own husbands, even as to the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, like also Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husband in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot nor wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. See here, brothers and sisters, it is quite clear. The Apostle Paul tells us that marriage is actually meant to be a picture of Christ's love for his people, his church, and it ought to be that way. The last book of the Bible is Revelation chapter 19. You'll find there again the picture of marriage being used in In Revelation 19 and verse 7, let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. So you see here, without even the need to reason with you any further, I'm sure that you are quite convinced that the Song of Solomon, in its poetical Hebrew poetry presentation of Solomon's love for this woman, the Shulamite woman, brothers and sisters, is actually a representative of Christ's love for his church. It is important for you to read this Song of Solomon in this way. So we read here in chapter 1 and verse 1 of the Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs, which is about Solomon. Learn here then, brothers and sisters, that what awaits you the next few Sundays will be a good reflection of what true love is. And for those of you who are not married yet, it ought to be something that you think about courtship, love expressed, about wedding, love matured, about marital life, love tested. And may God in His mercy preserve those who are married, that just because of this morning, you realize that marital life is a testing ground. There's no such thing as a peaceful marriage. There is no such thing as a bed of roses. There will be struggle. There will be differences. And sometimes it can be very bad. And on top of that, there will be interference from your family and from her family. And there will be this comparison. Why are you so bad? And why my friend's husband, why my friend's wife are so much better than you? Why are you so untidy, so dirty? Why don't you know how to cook? Why don't you know how to keep the house tidy and clean? Whereas my friend's spouse can do all these things. There will always be this comparison that will breed hurt and breed hatred and breed distrust and breed the loss of love. But you are a Christian. You must remember that the marital life is for love to be tested, for you to grow even deeper in love and not to pull you away, further and away from love. That when people look at you, they'll say, I don't understand the Song of Solomon, but by looking at you, now I understand the Song of Solomon. And may God be greatly glorified. We start a new year now. First Sunday of a new decade. Brothers and sisters, I plead with you to dedicate this new decade and new year to love God and to be loved by Him. Let time show, brothers and sisters, let time show that you do truly love the Lord. Let your life show that despite the love tested, you will walk with God and you will never doubt His love for you. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Let us pray.